people say, are you a book person or are you, for the internet? I think it's a bit like the monks saying that they thought Gutenberg's printing press was the work of the devil. It's already here. It is a way of communicating ideas. In the past, we communicated them through print media. This is the way that people are sharing ideas. What I want to see is education embrace the way that our young people already are communicating and use it more creatively than they do.
Creatively, but also responsibly. In this programme, we'll see some of the best that the internet can enable. This school, for example, is working collaboratively with a school on another continent to enable pupils to invent brand new games.
In the pool, is everyone getting a defending ball as well?
Actually, that's a good point at pool. Yeah, no. Yes, give everybody a defending ball.
But we'll also hear some of the grave dangers that the internet presents to educators. Many will find this admission from a university student shocking.
Most of my GCSE coursework was probably plagiarising because we didn't have to reference and we were never taught about that, although it was important.
One of the issues that came up in our work with universities and colleges was that students were already coming to higher education accomplished plagiarists because of the practices that were happening in schools.
Schools are beginning to wake up to the dangers of plagiarism and are starting to teach pupils about referencing, alongside the use of the web as an immensely powerful research tool.
When you're going to be doing research with me, I'm going to ask you for everything you submit to me to give me a bibliography. Very often I'm going to ask you for rough drafts so that you're going to show me the process that you did of combining information and putting it into your own words. So at no point can you ever be guilty of plagiarism. Plagiarism is important to teach right from the beginning. Because they have to get used to the fact that anything that doesn't come out of their own head, that has come from somewhere else, they have to acknowledge that somewhere else. And the easiest way to do that is to make them aware of how they would feel if someone took their information.
In order to do this, Anne-Marie has devised an exercise that illustrates the consequences of plagiarism.
Now, would you exchange your paper with someone else, please? Exchange your papers with someone else. Right. Make sure you have someone else's paper. Now, would you put your names at the top above the other people's names? When you finish that, you're going to hand them in because I'm going to give you credit for their work. This is your work? Yeah. So you did a bit more than they did.
Did I?
Yes, but that's okay because they're really happy over here because they're now going to get all your marks. So they'll probably get a star, but you'll probably only get a tick.
Can I swap back?
Can you swap back? Why do you want to swap back, honey?
I need to find a better one.
You need to find a better one to swap with. Is it fair to have somebody else's work? If they get into the habit of immediately, whenever they answer a question, that the first thing they do is write down where the information has come from, it just becomes second nature. You can't add it on later on when bad habits are already there. If you go onto a website and you find really good information about bullying and you want to use it in your poster next week, how could you use it without plagiarizing from that site?
Put it into your own words.
All right, so you can put it in your own words. What else?
You could get two different websites and take a little bit of that and add it to the other one.
So you're combining information from more than one site. That's another part of the equation, but you still are using other people's ideas. It still hasn't come out of your head to begin with.
Whilst Anne-Marie uses literacy sessions within the library to educate pupils about plagiarism, she also spends much of her time supporting teachers in developing pupils' online research skills.
Using the internet, find out 3 things you could do if you were being bullied.
We could go to the anti-bullying website, the one that was on the bottoms on the goalpost thing.
Yeah, that was
the library.
Yeah.
Using the books in the project box, find out 3 things you could do if you are being bullied.
All of the Year 7 pupils spend 1 period a week with me in the library. This is our literacy development in terms of information literacy. It's taking your ability to read further and saying reading for a specific purpose, and in this purpose it's to gather information and use it for a specific target. So what I'd like to do is find out what were successful strategies and what were some less successful strategies, because we can learn from one another. Research, there's not any one way to do these things. There are lots of different approaches, and we can learn from each other. I think in this day and age, with the advent of the internet, these youngsters don't have a shortage of information. They have far too much information. They have to, more than any other generation, learn how to be selective and have very high standards of criteria that they're going to use to choose the best information for their particular need. It's crucial that they know how to do that. So what are the questions you need to ask yourself when you're looking for information? Yes?
Why or when?
Why it was written, yes. What's the purpose of the website? Yes. What else?
When it was written, so you know how updated it is.
Good, so you know it's up to date. Down on paper to
Anne-Marie has also worked closely with teachers, supporting them to embrace the internet as a learning resource.
I've been working with the librarian Anne-Marie for 2 or 3 years now. We do normally 2 or 3 projects together each year across the 3 key stages. This is a Year 7 biology lesson, and we're at lesson 2 in a series of 8. Basically what I've tried to do is to build as much research and independent learning into a scheme as possible to try and make as much of the personal learning and thinking skills and the how science works and all the other elements, as well as the ranging content. If you were a manager of a zoo, you wouldn't just live in isolation with your zoo or animal park. You would also go and visit other attractions and try and get the best bits out of there. So there's nothing wrong with that. We call it copying, but actually copying is different. Copying is just writing something out word for word and claiming it's your own. You can take an idea and develop it. And you know, that's a good thing to do. Running alongside this, and we're trialling it this year, is we're running a wiki, which is obviously a content-based website where the students have ownership of that, and there's 4 to a group. They can all have a password and a user ID for that, and they can log on to it and basically upload new resources, new ideas, even have conversations online at home about how their project is progressing, and they've really, really benefited from that.
The wiki is a site that helps communication between pupils, so you can access it from home and then talk to each other and discuss projects. And it's also to give us information that we might not have got from school and get it at home. And it's also just a connection between sort of home and school and the pupils in school.
I think the challenges of putting something like this on are actually confidence. The biggest thing is teacher confidence. Confidence in the resources, confidence in the idea, and also confidence to be able to communicate it to other members of your department that they can do it too. Things that I struggled with in the early stages were the reliability of the technology, and of course, you know, with sometimes internet being down, you plan a lesson, the internet's down and your lesson goes out the window and you need a plan B. So you've almost got to double plan every lesson to make sure that there is a backup plan. But actually it's very freeing, because once you've got into it, and the students give so much.
ICT has also been making headway as a research tool in one of the less obvious departments within the school, that of physical education.
Let's play some games. Games are as follows. Southern Fried Chicken are playing Griffin. Smurfs are refereeing.
PE teacher Ashley Casey has joined forces with Anne-Marie in evaluating a series of brand new games that have been thought up and designed by the pupils themselves online. A professor in America has also given his input via the internet.
Anne-Marie mentioned the wiki site to me, and that kind of set a seed going, and it's taken me about 6 months to come to an idea exactly how to use it. And then mixing it in with Professor Hasty in our discussions, it just seemed to move from paper-based, which sport education is normally, to internet-based, computer-based, with access to, you know, so much in terms of resources. So it's been a real way of bringing ICT into PE in a meaningful way, not just, oh, let's take some measures and distances and then we'll put them into a spreadsheet. I'm not keen on using ICT in that way unless it's meaningful for the kids.
We're just making some comments on the wiki to put across different ideas that we've had for the game and how it could be improved or changed. Using the wiki gives everybody a great chance to be able to communicate quite easily.
That's available to be edited by the teachers involved, so Mr. Casey and Professor Hasty. So across in America, Professor Hasty can see what we've been developing and give input onto the site, whilst we in games lessons can edit it and play through it and develop it that way.
I think you should be able to move in the zone with the ball so that you can place it anywhere you want, so it puts more tactics into it.
Yeah, so you could drop it at one side, then run with the fact. Yeah.
With the wiki, it's definitely given us a lot more input than we could have done ourselves, I believe, that's then helped in sort of creating the game to what they are now.
Like say that you are actually allowed to move with the ball, and then if you get touched, then that would mean that you had to pass it. So kind of like rugby league, but you wouldn't put it through your legs.
It's so much easier to edit than the paper. If I really wouldn't want this job if I was trying to do it with paper, I'd just have to keep redrawing everything. We've changed the rules on this so many times. Because to start with we had tennis balls, but then we realised they're hard and they hurt, and they just bounce out of the pitch. So we've changed it to bean bags, and now we've realised that's not going to work when we go into the pool. They're just going to sink and we'll never get them back.
So, what do you think so far?
I think it's gone really well. These two groups especially have bought into it a lot.
I get such a buzz out of watching the fact that kids who I know are not particularly athletic, but because they are very IT, that's their strength is IT, suddenly they're bringing something to a games lesson. Well, I know that the kids perceive it as being the cool factor, because one of the lads stopped me in town and said they thought the wiki was really cool and they really, really enjoyed games because, that whole thing of they'd never done a wiki before as a way of collaborating together. So I think we managed to somehow amalgamate what in their eyes is new, cutting-edge IT things with traditional game setting.
And I think it's challenging all different sorts of demographics in terms of what we're trying to do in PE. So much so that I think I might have convinced Siobhan to actually invest in our own wiki for the department, to expand it into teaching of GCSE and other aspects of the curriculum so that the kids get much more hands-on. I think
I've been concerned that our youngsters get used to working as individuals. And so it's always about my own personal achievement. And in the world of work, very rarely do you work on your own in isolation and just you achieve. It is always a team effort. You're always asking colleagues to collaborate with you and to share ideas. And the wiki enables that in a way that even in the classroom, they don't necessarily do for peer pressure reasons, whatever, but they get home at night, they send an idea out on the wiki, someone else responds to it, and they somehow work at a much higher level.
I think as we go on to sort of higher education, so through A-level and then onto universities, having the knowledge and the ability to use the internet as research already would definitely be helpful in that sense, that we're able to perhaps not just use it for research but communicate with other people that can then better our understanding of stuff.
As the internet is being increasingly used for research purposes by students, schools are facing pressure to react to the risks of plagiarism.
The surveys that were done back in sort of 2001 by Don McCabe in the US indicate that there was quite a high level of plagiarism both in schools and universities. Institutions are very concerned about it. Institutions believe they've got a very big problem. And at the beginning of this year, the ATL, the Association of Teachers and Lecturers, did a survey of 300 sixth form teachers, and that survey said that 58% of them believed that plagiarism was a big issue.
In response to this increasing concern within schools about plagiarism, free workshops have been held across the country.
The first session of the day, as I said, we're looking at what is plagiarism, because you can't really have any discussions about plagiarism misuse, think about any solutions before you've actually got a clear idea about what it is you're talking about. The workshops came about from previous work that I've been doing, looking at plagiarism issues within higher and further education, and we decided to see if there are similar sorts of issues within schools as compared to higher and further education. But we did have trouble actually getting to school teachers through issues of releasing them their staff time, and also the recognition that plagiarism is actually an important issue. But we did get a lot of librarians attending. So this particular programme has been targeted at school librarians with a view to them taking the issues back to their schools.
It's almost sometimes as if the idea of copying things from the net is endorsed by the work that's given out by the teachers themselves. There's instances all the time of people's good coursework and good essays actually being photocopied and given out by staff without the students' permission.
The first thing that any institution needs to do is ensure that students have the correct skills and that they're properly informed about the expectations of them when they're doing assignments, of course. Especially if the process that they're used to for creating a piece of work is going to the web and just pulling it together. And I think this is why it's so important to deal with this in secondary education, especially now where there's potentially quite a big gap between the sort of culture that the students are used to and working with online and their tutors.
In your pack there is a sheet of paper called Plagiarism, Where Do You Draw the Line? So we're going to let you decide whether you think it is or isn't plagiarism. There is no off-the-shelf solution to the plagiarism issue, unfortunately, as much as people would like one. I think the answer does lie in education, and education right from primary schools, and a coherent approach across the schools and education sector in general. So they're not just presented at GCSE or A-level with a new way of working, you know, the idea of referencing sources and that it's not okay just to copy and paste, that they need to put some thought into issues themselves is habit and not just something they feel they have to do for exams. It's not easy, and you know, it will take a number of years to get these practices embedded.
We decided it was plagiarism because it was telling them to learn it off by heart.
We decided it wasn't because it depended what the student actually physically wrote down. They might have remembered it off by heart, but it depends what they actually physically wrote down at the end of the day.
I'm more confused now than I was to start off with.
While schools may just be starting to become aware of plagiarism, universities have been dealing with the issue for many years.
One thing that we found is that students are coming to the university without any prior knowledge of plagiarism or referencing. So, for instance, in our first lecture, we asked of the 160 students there how many of them had heard of referencing, Harvard referencing, and of that group, 3 people put their hand up. So if those 3 people are the only people in the room who know about plagiarism and referencing, then we know that there's another 157 who don't. And that's why I think it's essential that we give them the tools to realise what is plagiarism, teach them how to reference correctly, because if they do it and they do it seriously, then potentially they could be thrown out of university.
Until we came here, I'd never done anything on plagiarism. The coursework at school, you didn't have to bother about it. Most of my GCSE coursework was probably plagiarism because we didn't have to reference and we were never taught about that, although it was important.
I think definitely, at least on A levels, they should cover this subject because it is majorly important. You can be kicked out from uni from anywhere because of that.
I think it's hard coming to uni and having to learn a completely different way of writing an essay when you've got so used to doing it another way. If you'd just always done it that way, it'd already kind of be in there.
At the University of Leeds, a study skills workshop has been introduced for some first-year students, specifically to tackle their lack of awareness about plagiarism.
OK, so today what we're going to look at is the skills needed in writing a bibliography, that's referencing within the text and also including the bibliography at the end of the essay. The aim of this is to give you the skills needed to produce good work and also to avoid the problems of plagiarism. Has anybody here done any skills work at school, which has given you the background for avoiding plagiarism and doing bibliographies? A couple of you, right. So for the rest of you, it's to fill these gaps so that you have these skills throughout your university career.
The reason why I was asked to develop the module was because we were trying to bridge a gap really between historically students were coming to university with some study skills that now they don't necessarily have. And we found in the first year we ran it, I think approximately 80 students out of 130 took it as an optional module. And we could see when they were being marked straight away which ones had taken that module. I think for us it was quite a clear decision to say all of our students need to do this in their first year.
Writing is now actually more important than it was before. Just about everything online involves written text. And many students are much more IT literate than their tutors are. And they'll already be contributing to websites. They're already writing. And also, they're probably already taking content from all over the place and building it into their own websites happily oblivious to the fact that somebody else may own the copyright. So I think it's actually very important to start this work as early as possible. I mean, I would think that children of the ages 8 and 9 could start to cope with some of these concepts about the fact that the content is owned by somebody and you should really acknowledge where it's come from, and it's not just a free-for-all.
At Hemsworth Arts and Community College near Pontefract, lessons on plagiarism have been delivered in one department for the past few years.
If we quoted anything, if we'd used a source of information, we need to reference it, okay? And what's another good reason for having good references? What does that show that you've done? You've done loads of research, so you should get credit for all that research that you've done. As a college, we've been involved in vocational education for a long time, which has a significant coursework element. And as the years have gone on and students have moved more from using text and much more to using internet, then we have had to recognise and develop strategies and policies that help us to help the students to work in the context of the requirements of the awarding bodies. I know that from my own experience with my daughter at university, the first thing that she had to learn when she got to university was how to Harvard reference. And it was quite a steep learning curve for her. And it did occur to me that perhaps that was a system that we could bring in on a book's published in 2005. It's quite easy to find the date. Does that book change? No, because once that book's published, there it is. Somebody can always go and get it, can't they? Yeah? What about a website?
It changes.
It changes, right? So, what do you think you might have to say in your bibliography? Because you know that websites change.
What day you took it off that website?
Excellent. That's exactly right. You need to say exactly when you took that information from the website. What we need our students to be able to do is to avoid any suggestion that they have plagiarised other people's work. And one of the ways that we can do that is to teach them to recognise that they have used the work of others. And it is important that we actually teach them this skill. Many of them haven't done coursework before, and it's the first opportunity they've really had to do extensive research. And as a consequence, they do actually need to be taught how to reference and give credit to the work of others. Summarise the final paragraph. So you see this here? It goes on for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines.
So do I have to copy that out?
No, if you copied it, that wouldn't be summarising it, would it? If you summarise something, what do you do?
I don't know, make it shorter.
That's right, exactly right. You make it shorter.
If somebody would have said to us before we'd had this lesson that we were doing plagiarism in our coursework, then we just wouldn't have had a clue what they were on about. But now, if somebody come up to us and said, you've got plagiarism in this piece of work, we'd know what to do about it and we'd know how to change it.
If I didn't know about it, then I'd be doing it without noticing it, and then that's when I'd like lose marks and stuff on my exams for doing it.
We've got to do a lot of research and we are copying a lot of things from other people's work. So it's useful to know that if we do that, we've got to put where we got it from, because I won't doing that in the first place.
In terms of plagiarism, we're just sort of dipping our toe in the water, really. We have got the Vocational Studies Department that have actually done an awful lot on this, but we're at the stage now where we're starting to roll that out to other areas. So, for example, the Maths Department, Science Department are involved with Judith and her team. And, you know, there's no point in reinventing the wheel. If Judith's got a good system, then, you know, other people can learn from that.
OK, Andrea, so what I was thinking was today might be a good idea if we just caught up with each other about where we both are in terms of dealing with plagiarism.
Well, what we've done is we've developed a booklet like you have in your faculty and in science, and we've actually developed that specifically for the scientists.
I think you've got to look at each department's sort of workload and look at where their priorities are and talk to them about whether or not this is an issue for them. And, you know, some people it may be just raising awareness of it altogether, but for some people they may have already started and not be aware that Judith's doing lots of things, and it could save them an awful lot of time and effort by just simply having maybe a 15-20 minute conversation with Judith or somebody in that team.
So one of the things that we've found with students is they're very good at bibliography, but one of the things that it's quite hard for them to get a grasp of is how to actually cite in the text. So I've just started doing some little citing exercises so they get the idea of putting a name, and they can now do et al. And the date. So I don't know whether you might want to sort of look at doing something like that as well.
I'd be interested in coming and having a look at what you're actually doing with them and then actually doing that within science.
The students are more confident when they go to university because they've had the opportunity to develop good practice, to organise, to evaluate their work and to reference it. We know that it's not up to the standard of a university when they leave, but we do know that they're ahead of the game. You've actually taken the key areas that you're looking at for your essay and you've put each of the websites under the topic. So why did you do that?
Because it's easier for me to go back through my work, and also I've put it like that in my work. I can always go back and find the research that I need.
Oh, good.
I think the issue for us is teaching students how to use the ICT appropriately. When we first started talking about using mobile phones and podcasting and iPods and things like that, some staff were a little bit reticent, but you know we've had to work with those staff and say, look, this is getting to the 21st century really, and this is what students want, and this is how they'll learn best, and it's how we actually manage that situation, which is the challenge. But we've got to take that on. We can't sort of bury our heads in the sand and say no, we're still using the old-fashioned book system.